The email arrived on a Monday morning, so ordinary it almost felt insulting. No dramatic subject line. No bold formatting. Just a quiet notification sliding into my inbox while I was halfway through my second coffee and already behind on deadlines. From Victor Hale's subject, anniversary dinner invitation, I stared at the sender's name longer than I should have. Victor Hale didn't email people casually. He delegated, he summoned. If your inbox carried his name, it meant something good or bad. I opened it slowly. The message was brief, but precise. The company's 10-year anniversary, an exclusive dinner at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city, a small guest list, senior leadership only, spouses welcome. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling through my nose. For 8 years, I had built my life around this company. Late nights that turned into early mornings, missed family gatherings, canceled trips, promises to my wife that we'd make up for it later. I told myself it was temporary, that I was building something solid for us. This invitation felt like recognition, like I had finally crossed an invisible line from expendable to essential. I printed the email and folded it neatly, slipping it into my jacket pocket like a secret I couldn't wait to reveal. That evening, when I got home, Lena was sitting on the couch scrolling through her phone, legs tucked beneath her. The TV was on, but she wasn't watching it. "Hey," I said, kissing her cheek. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I got something today," I said, pulling the paper from my pocket and placing it on the coffee table. She glanced down at it, then back up at me. "What is it?" "Company anniversary dinner? Victor's hosting it himself. Spouses invited." There was a pause, not long, not dramatic, just long enough to notice. "Oh," she said, "that's nice. Nice." I had expected excitement, a joke, maybe even pride. Instead, she picked up the paper, skimmed it, and set it back down. "You'll come with me, right?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Of course," she said. "Why wouldn't I?" I shrugged. "You don't usually like my work events." She forced a small laugh. "I'll survive one dinner." Something about the exchange left a faint pressure in my chest, but I ignored it. Marriage wasn't a movie. Not every moment needed fireworks. The night of the dinner arrived faster than I expected. Lena stood in front of the bedroom mirror, adjusting the strap of her black dress. It was simple, elegant, and hugged her in a way that reminded me exactly why I fell in love with her. "You look incredible," I said. "Thank you," she replied softly. Her phone buzzed on the dresser. She flipped it face down without checking the screen. I noticed. "Everything okay?" I asked casually. "Yeah," she said quickly. "Just spam." I nodded, though my reflection in the mirror looked less convinced than I felt. As we drove toward the city, the skyline glittering ahead of us, I told myself this night was a celebration, a turning point, something good. I didn't know it yet, but this was the last time I would see my life as stable. The restaurant sat high above the city, encased in glass and gold light, like success itself had been given an address. Soft jazz floated through the air. Servers moved with rehearsed precision. Everyone there wore confidence like a tailored suit. Victor Hale stood near the entrance, greeting guests one by one. In person, he was even more imposing than he seemed in meetings. Tall, calm, the kind of man who never rushed because the world adjusted to his pace. When it was our turn, he shook my hand firmly. "Ethan," he said, "glad you could make it." Then his eyes shifted. They landed on Lena, stayed there. "And you must be his wife, Lena," she said, offering her hand. Victor took it, his grip gentle but deliberate. He held it a moment longer than necessary. "A pleasure," he said, his voice lowering slightly. "A real pleasure." Something tightened in my stomach. Throughout the cocktail hour, I noticed it again and again. Victor's gaze drifting back to Lena. During conversations, during laughter, even while listening to someone else speak, his attention found her like it was automatic. At first I told myself I was being paranoid. Victor was known for his charm. This was just how powerful men behaved. But Lena noticed it too. She stood closer to me than usual. Her posture stiffened whenever she felt his eyes on her. She smiled politely, but the warmth wasn't there. "You okay?" I murmured. "Yeah," she said, just overwhelmed. The speeches began. Applause echoed against the glass walls. Victor spoke about loyalty, vision, and the people who made the company what it was. When he mentioned sacrifice, his eyes flicked to Lena for just a second. I told myself I imagined it. Dinner was announced. As we were led to our table, my stomach dropped. Victor sat directly across from Lena. It felt intentional. Conversation flowed easily at first. Projects, expansion plans, inside jokes from years before my time. Victor controlled the room effortlessly. Then he turned to Lena. "So," he said casually, "what do you do?" She hesitated. "I used to work in interior design." "Used to," he repeated. "Why stop?" "Life changed," she said. Victor smiled slowly. "Life always does." The words hung heavier than they should have. As the courses came and went, his attention toward her sharpened. Compliments slipped into observations. Observations slipped into something else entirely. "You have excellent taste," he said. "You don't speak much, but when you do, people listen. You seem like someone who notices things others miss." I sat beside her, smiling when expected, laughing when required, feeling strangely invisible. At one point, a coworker leaned toward me and whispered, Victor has a habit of noticing people he likes. I laughed it off. Inside, unease spread like a slow leak. When I excused myself to take a call, I had no idea what would happen in the minutes I was gone. Dinner unfolded like a carefully choreographed performance, and Victor Hale was its conductor. He controlled the rhythm of the table effortlessly when laughter rose, when silence fell, when conversation shifted from business to something more personal. I had seen him run meetings this way countless times, steering outcomes without ever appearing forceful. But tonight, his focus was different. Every path led back to Lena. As plates were cleared and fresh wine was poured, Victor leaned back in his chair, studying her openly now, no longer pretending discretion. "You know," he said, swirling his glass, "the most interesting people at these events are rarely the ones with titles." Lena offered a polite smile. "I wouldn't know." "Oh, I think you would," he replied smoothly. "You've been observing all night." Her fork paused midair. "I don't mean that in a bad way," Victor continued. "Some people talk to be heard. Others listen to understand. That's a rare skill." I cleared my throat. "Lena's always been thoughtful." Victor nodded without looking at me. "Yes, thoughtful people often are." The dismissal was subtle, but it landed hard. As the conversation continued, I noticed how Victor leaned toward her when he spoke, lowering his voice just enough to create intimacy. It was the same technique he used in negotiations, make people feel chosen. "So you stopped working," he said casually. "Do you miss it?" "Sometimes," Lena admitted. "But priorities change. They don't disappear," Victor said. "They wait." Something in his tone made my skin prickle. Across the table, she shifted in her seat. "I think some things are meant to stay in the past." Victor smiled faintly. "The past has a way of reminding us it exists." I tried to interrupt, steering the conversation back to neutral ground. "Victor, I wanted to ask you about the Asia expansion." "In a moment," he said, holding up a finger without looking at me. Without looking, the message was clear. This wasn't my moment anymore. As dessert arrived, Victor leaned back again, satisfied, like a man enjoying a private joke. A coworker beside me whispered, "You ever notice how Victor chooses a favorite at these events?" I forced a laugh. "You're imagining things." But my chest felt tight. My instincts screamed that something was happening right in front of me and I was powerless to stop it. When I excused myself to take a call from the office, I hesitated before standing. Lena met my eyes. There was something there I hadn't seen before. "Fear, I'll be right back," I said. She nodded, but her fingers clenched around her napkin. I walked away with my phone pressed to my ear, unaware that I was leaving her alone with a man who had spent the entire night positioning himself for exactly that moment. The call took less than 5 minutes. It felt longer. By the time I returned to the table, the energy had shifted. I sensed it before I even saw it, the subtle stillness that follows something irreversible. Victor was leaning toward Lena, not dramatically, not obviously, just close enough. His chair angled slightly toward hers, his arm resting casually on the table, fingers tapping once as he spoke, his mouth near her ear. I slowed my steps. He whispered something. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the effect instantly. Lena's face drained of color, like someone had pulled the life out of her with a single sentence. Her eyes widened, then dropped to the table. Her hand shook as she reached for her glass, missing it the first time. Victor leaned back slowly, satisfaction flickering across his face before disappearing behind a practiced smile. I stopped beside Lena. "Everything okay?" She flinched. "Yes," she said too quickly. "Fine." Victor looked up at me. "We were just talking about possibilities." The word lingered. "What kind of possibilities?" I asked. "The kind that make life interesting," Victor replied lightly, then turned his attention to someone else as if the moment were insignificant. My pulse thundered in my ears. I leaned closer to Lena. "What did he say to you?" She stared straight ahead. "Nothing important?" That didn't look like nothing. Her jaw tightened. "Ethan, please, not here." The rest of the dinner felt unreal. Applause sounded distant. Conversations blurred. I watched Victor closely now, noticing the confidence in his movements, the ease of someone who believed himself untouchable. At one point, he caught my eye across the table and smiled. Not the warm smile he gave investors or board members. This one was smaller, sharper, knowing. As the night wound down and people began to leave, Victor approached us again. "Lovely evening," he said, looking directly at Lena. "We'll talk soon." Her fingers dug into my arm. "What does that mean?" I asked once he walked away. She pulled free. "Can we just go home?" The drive was silent. Streetlights streaked past the windows like judgment. Lena stared out the passenger side, arms folded tightly across her chest. "What did he whisper?" I asked again, my voice low but firm. She closed her eyes. He said he knew I wasn't happy, that he could help, that some doors only open once." My grip tightened on the steering wheel. "And you didn't tell him to stop." I froze. She whispered, "He has so much power, Ethan." "So do choices," I replied. At home, she went straight to the bathroom and locked the door. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I looked at the screen. Victor Hale. "We'll talk soon." Something inside me broke, not loudly, but completely. That night, lying beside her in silence, I realized the dinner hadn't been the beginning. It had been the reveal. The silence that followed us home felt heavier than any argument ever had. Lena moved through the apartment like a ghost. She didn't speak, didn't cry. She placed her purse on the counter, slipped off her shoes, and disappeared into the bathroom, locking the door behind her with a soft click that echoed louder than it should have. I stood in the kitchen, still in my suit, staring at nothing. The evening replayed in fragments. Victor's stare, the way Lena's hands trembled, that whisper I hadn't heard but somehow understood anyway. Power had a voice. It didn't need volume. Her phone buzzed again on the counter. I told myself not to look. I looked. Victor Hale. You handled that better than most people would. We should talk privately. My chest tightened. Not anger yet. Something colder. More controlled. When Lena finally came out, her eyes were red, but her face was composed. We need to talk, I said. She nodded, sitting at the edge of the couch like a child waiting for punishment. How long has he been contacting you? I asked. She hesitated. That pause told me everything. A few weeks, she said quietly. It started after that charity event. You never told me. I didn't think it meant anything. And now, she swallowed. Now I don't know. The words cut deeper than any confession. Not knowing meant space. Possibility, choice. That night she slept facing the wall. I lay awake listening to her breathing, realizing trust doesn't shatter it, erodes quietly, grain by grain, until one day there's nothing left to stand on. Over the next few days, the signs multiplied. She guarded her phone, she took longer walks alone. She flinched when Victor's name came up in conversation. At work, Victor acted as if nothing had changed. He praised my work in meetings, asked about my lovely wife with a smile that felt rehearsed. Every interaction was layered now, 2 conversations happening at once. One afternoon, I checked the company directory. Victor had no reason to be messaging Lena directly, unless he wanted to. That's when I stopped asking questions, and started paying attention. I didn't confront Victor immediately. Men like him thrived on confrontation. They rewrote it, twisted it, used it to assert dominance. I needed clarity before emotion, so I watched. I reviewed timelines, late meetings, events Lena attended that I hadn't. Small overlaps that, on their own, meant nothing but together told a story. One evening, while Lena showered, her phone lit up again. I didn't read the message. I checked the thread history. There were gaps, deleted messages, conversations that jumped forward unnaturally, missing context, missing time. When I finally confronted Victor, it wasn't in anger. It was in his office, door closed, tone professional. You crossed the line, I said calmly. He leaned back in his chair, hands folded. Did I? She's my wife, and a grown woman, he replied, capable of her own decisions. The mask slipped not fully, but enough. She's unhappy, Victor continued. You should have noticed that. I stared at him. That doesn't give you permission. Power doesn't ask for permission, he said. It creates opportunity. That was it. Not denial, not apology, confirmation. I walked out knowing 2 things. He wasn't done, and neither was I. Over the next week, I gathered everything. Emails, metadata, patterns from other employees, quiet resignations, rumors that suddenly made sense. Victor had done this before. He just never chose the wrong man to do it to. The confrontation with Lena happened on a Sunday night. No distractions, no excuses. I placed my phone on the table and slid it toward her. Tell me the truth, she cried before she spoke. It wasn't physical, she said. But it wasn't nothing either. She admitted the messages, the attention, the way Victor made her feel seen when she felt invisible beside me. I didn't stop it soon enough, she whispered. That's on me. I realized something then. Cheating doesn't begin with touch. It begins with permission. I can't compete with power, I said quietly. You were never supposed to, she replied. But the damage was done. Trust doesn't survive comparison. That night I packed a bag. She begged me to stay. Promised change. Promised distance. But promises after betrayal feel like discounts after theft. I walked out knowing love without respect is just attachment. Victor fell quietly. HR investigations, legal pressure, board-level scrutiny. No scandal headlines, just a controlled collapse of influence. Men like him don't scream when they fall. They vanish. I resigned before the dust settled. Some thought I was foolish, walking away from security, from prestige. But peace has a value that doesn't show up on a paycheck. Months later, I sat alone in a new apartment, unpacking a life reduced to essentials. I thought about that whisper often, not the words, but the moment. That was when everything changed. If someone powerful ever looks at your partner like they already belong to them, if silence replaces honesty, if something inside you whispers pay attention, listen. Like, comment, and subscribe for more real, cinematic stories about betrayal, power, and rebuilding after heartbreak. Because some betrayals aren't shouted, they're whispered.